Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I am going to do a little bit of real-time crafting and I'm going to show you how I take one sketch and um, create three different cards with that sketch that look a little bit different, each one of them, but in spirit they still follow along with the sketch, and it just shows you how you can use a sketch to start as a starting point and then kind of just take it from there and give your own twist to it. So I'm going to start off with a very basic interpretation of the sketch. So I've got all of my pieces trimmed and cut and just ready to assemble. So I have a US A2 size card base. This is cut to 5.5 by 8.5. I've scored it along the 8.5-inch edge at 4.25 by 5.5 is the final folded dimension of the card base. Then my first piece is to add a solid green cardstock layer. This has been cut to the exact size of the card base. So this is cut at 4.25 by 5.5. And you can definitely skip this step if you don't want to have this extra bit of color here. My approach whenever I'm attaching anything to my card base is, especially my very first matte layer, I always try to get it as flush or parallel to the fold as possible, because if you're off on any of the other three edges, you can still trim your card base. You can't trim this edge because this is the folded edge. So because we know this should match 100%, I'm going to put this all the way flush to that fold line. Make sure it's flush at the top and bottom as well. And then I will give this a really good burnish. I'm using double-sided adhesive tape, but you can use any kind of adhesive, whatever you prefer. Then the next layer, I have some beautiful pattern paper from Graphic 45, and this is cut just a smidge smaller, and you can cut this, trim this down to whatever size you prefer, just depending on how much of that background layer you want visible. This piece has been trimmed to 4 inches by 5.25. So you can see if I line it up at this edge, it's just 1/4 of an inch more narrow and 1/4 of an inch shorter. And again, just for speediness, I've already put some double-sided adhesive on the back, and I'll go ahead and center this piece. I always do this to open my card and really double check every time I put something down that I'm putting it down the correct way up. Then I'll go ahead and burnish this down too. Make sure we have a nice firm stick there. Love this pattern paper because it really does most of the work on our card, because there's just already so much detail there. The card sketch then has this narrow strip here, which has been cut to 4 inches by 1. And I picked a coordinating color, so this nice purple picks up a lot of the purples in the backgrounds of the papers. Then just to add a little bit of a twist to it, I'm going to add this strip of orange ribbon. And on top of that, I've got my sentiment, which I have stamped in a black VersaFine ink, and then I did heat emboss it just for that extra bit of shine. Totally optional, but it's an easy way to just lift your sentiments a little bit. So instead of that matte look, you get a nice glossy look. And I'm just going to audition this out a little bit to see if I want the ribbon to be right in the middle of my purple. I think the ribbon's kind of nice because it kind of picks up some of the orange from the pumpkins or the jack-o'-lanterns. Or if I want to push the ribbon a little bit off center, so a little bit towards the top or a little bit towards the bottom. And I think I'll center it. So I'm gonna go ahead and attach my ribbon first, and I did put a little line of double-sided adhesive tape on this as well. And I'm gonna use the lines on my mat because I have a terrible time eyeballing what's straight. But I did cut the stretch of ribbon so that it's wider than 4 inches. That way I can just wrap it around to the back. And maybe it's a little bit easier for me to do it this way. What I'll do is I'm going to just line up one edge of my ribbon with a line on my mat. Tack it down. And then I can just pull this so that it also lines up on that same line. And that should be roughly, if you haven't pushed down hard, you might still be able to lift it a little, but that looks about centered. And then I'm just going to wrap this around to the back. Since I already have that adhesive, it's going to already be attached. So that's nice and firmly attached. Again, I already have adhesive on the back of this piece too. And judging by where I put the adhesive, it looks like I already knew I was going to center that. So let me go ahead and get this attached to our card. And the sketch does indicate to push it a little bit lower, but that works really well with this pattern paper too. That way we get more of this scene right here. And here's one thing, if you want this to kind of be the focal image, but there's two other, because it's a repeat pattern, what I could do is push this up a little bit just to hide it, so that this being the brightest color really stands out. And so I might just go ahead, and that's not quite following the sketch 100%, but I think with our pattern paper being designed the way it is, that might ultimately look a little bit better, so in this case. And then I'll go ahead and attach this piece, and I can push this down a little bit just to bring some of that weight back down, and also show a little bit more of that jack-o'-lantern. So, and here's where I stamped but then smudged a little bit. Don't throw scraps like that away, because you can always just flip them over and stamp again. So go ahead and get this positioned just like that and give that a nice burnish. So that's our first card complete. Pretty easy, and a very straightforward interpretation of the sketch. So we're letting the pattern paper really do most of the work. So that's the first card. Let's bring on the bits for my second card. So I've already attached my first matte layer, which is black, and I'll get my next layer on, which is this really lovely pattern paper. Again, I'm using papers from Graphic 45's Charmed collection to make myself a couple more Halloween cards. And just like the first one, I will do my best to center this. I think I'm a little... Oh, yeah, that's good. There we go. And for this version, what I'll do is, here's my 1 inch by 4 inch strip. But instead of using a sentiment like we did, I'm going to build up a little scene. So I've just got some die cut elements here. I've got my die cut sentiment as well. And I'm going to build up a little bit of a scene. So I'm going to start off with this fence piece. I'm going to attach this to my strip here, but I'm going to do that first because this is longer than what I need, and this way I can actually position it exactly where I want it, and then just snip along those edges. So for pieces like these that are really, really fine, I like to just use a nice liquid adhesive and just dot it on. And I'm really just focusing on the posts that go up and down because they are larger. So it's a little bit easier for me to get glue onto them. And I think I do want this one straight post here. Well, maybe this taller one too. Okay, so I'm gonna aim to get that right on the edge. Start there. And then that way I don't have that much to trim off. Perfect. I will still give this a nice burnish. Make sure these fence posts have nice firm contact with that background piece. And now we just need to trim off the bits that are hanging. And it's easier for me to trim when I have something straight to trim against. So there's that. Got a little bit hanging off the bottom here. Perfect. So that's one piece. Then what I'll do is just kind of audition things out a little bit. So I want that towards the bottom, just like our sketch showed us. And I'll use this circle shape. Instead of our sentiment like we did for the first one, I'll just create a little scene within here. So maybe I'll have the silhouette of a tree, this sort of headstone, and then our black cat. Something like that. So let me go ahead and start to get everything attached so that we can just continue to build up. So anytime I audition a piece, when I feel fairly certain where it should go, I like to get that piece down and commit a little bit along the way. So there's that. And then with our sentiment, I did die cut this twice. Once out of black, so we have that option. We can layer with a little bit of it being offset. So even though it's orange and the background's orange, having that little bit of a black shadow makes it a little bit more visible, but again, subtle, but still legible. So that's another decision that I'm going to be thinking about as I put this part together. So I think I'll want something like that. I'm okay with the tree kind of breaking through. Same with this. I do want the cat to be very visible in the yellow, because I think that's very striking. So I might do something like that. So let's get the cat down, because I know for certain I want this cat fully against the yellow circle so that you can really see all of the cat. So get this one down first, and then I can build everything else around that. So I'll go something like that. And as well, I want to, I'm gonna go ahead, take my gum eraser. I got a little bit of extra glue where I don't want it. There we go. I might as well go ahead and attach this down too, so that I know where this circle is going to ultimately be positioned. Get this onto my card, and then build the last two elements around that. So there's that. And now I've got my tree. And then I do think I want the gravestone to be in front. Let's see how it looks from behind. I think I actually do like it better from behind. So that's what I'm gonna do. So then I'll put this down first, since the tree will go over top of it. And I kind of like having it at a bit of an angle. And then our tree can go right in front. So parts of this tree will hang, just a little bit of it's going to hang off the card, but that's okay, because again, I can just snip off whatever ends up hanging off the card. And just try to get glue to the little bit to the tips of these branches, so that they don't accidentally lift off. Okay. So maybe something like that. All right. And again, just snip whatever is hanging off the edge. Then the last thing is the sentiment. So let's see, we can go with just black, or keep it a little bit more subtle, so that this really, because the black is so striking, your eye really just goes here first. And I think that's what I'll do. The other way to get glue onto fine die cuts like these, you can, if your skin doesn't have any sort of reaction or allergy to liquid adhesive, you can just put a little bit onto the back of your hand like this, and then just dab your die cut into that adhesive. And now I can position this, and I want to offset this a little bit so that some of the black is showing, so that it's a little bit of a shadow for our sentiment. That way it's still going to be legible off of the background there. So go ahead and burnish that. And then still have some glue here, so pick some of that up. All right. And I think I'm going to put this at a little bit of an angle too. And I'll show you all three cards at the very end, so that you can see how similar they are, but also how different they are. So there's our second card, using the same sketch, but building up a bit of a scene in this focal area instead of our sentiment. So onto the last card. So again, I've got all of my pieces prepped. So we're gonna again start off with our solid color cardstock, and this has been cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so exact same size as our card base that's folded. Okay, and then with some pattern papers, there's really no no specific orientation that you have to use it. So for example, if I bring in the first card, you definitely have to use this pattern in this orientation because it really just does not make sense otherwise. Pattern like this is just a really lovely floral with some vines, so you can really use this in any direction you want. And even with some of this card, you can use it in any direction. Just take note because this one's got the moon face, but you can kind of rotate that. Now with this, I'll go ahead and apply this onto our card, just like I did for the other two. And since these pattern papers are double-sided, always be checking the backs to see if there's another option you prefer to use. Sometimes I have one design in mind and then I'll see the back of a paper and decide I'd prefer to use that instead. So because this card, or this pattern, you can use in multiple orientations, I'm gonna rotate it. So instead of having my fold on the left here and my card open sideways like this, I'm going to turn it so that my fold is at the top, and this will be a top folding card where you lift up instead. But I'm going to still follow the pattern more or less from our design. So we have the seam strip. This is 1 inch by 4. And again, I'll sort of dry run this a little bit. So I'll push that a little bit towards the bottom there. And then I've got some additional extra cuts here of another pattern paper and a larger piece just to have a little bit of a border. And maybe I'll do something a little bit like that. So the spirit of the pattern, or the sketch, is there. We've got our focal image area here. We still have this strip running across there. I can put my sentiment here, and so let's start with that. So let's go ahead and put this piece down because it's the next sort of lowest piece, and we'll build everything else on top of this. All right, so I'm gonna line it up with the pattern paper along this edge. And then I'll get these two attached. And we'll just try my best to center this. And then I can now use this as just one piece together and get this one attached to our card. So you can see sketches are really fun starting point for ideas, but then you can really make them your own and change them up quite a bit. So I think I still want a little bit of, so I could push this all the way to the edge, but I do think I want a little bit of that pattern paper, and you can see how well these coordinate because that pattern with the purple flowers and the green vines is built into that image. So what I'm aiming for is to keep the same amount of pattern paper showing there as on the bottom here. I think that looks good to me, so do that. And I've got my little sentiment here. So go ahead and get a little bit of adhesive behind this one. And then just to dress it up a little, maybe I'll put a little bit of a bow that I've already tied. Just so that we can, so you can do something like that maybe. Bring some of that green over to this corner here. And what I think I'll use to attach that is a glue dot. My glue dots are 1/2 inch wide, so it's more than what I need. So what I'll do is I'm gonna cut the glue dot in half and then fold it in half so that it's nice and small. You can just put it right behind where the knot is on my bow and go ahead and attach that to my card. So there's our last card. Pretty simple and easy to do, but a fun, different take on the sketch. So here's a final look at all 3 cards that we created today. That one is the landscape version. This one is one where we've built up a little bit of a scene. And here's our first card where let the pattern paper kind of do most of the work and then followed the sketch more or less as it was designed. So I hope that you had fun crafting along with me today, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.